Hello friends, if you follow me on Instagram you know that I have been moving, so that's why I haven't been doing videos, but I am all moved in and I am back to my regular posting schedule. So today I'm going to be talking about the Ocean Ranger disaster. So the Ocean Ranger was the largest oil rig in the world at the time. It was off the coast of Newfoundland, 315 kilometers east of St. John's. It could drill more than 7 kilometers below the ocean floor. It was 120 meters long, 80 meters wide, 100 meters high, weighed 25 tons. It floated on two 120-meter long pontoons that rested 25 meters below the surface. The Ocean Ranger was approved for unrestricted ocean operations. It had previously operated off the coasts of Alaska, New Jersey, and Ireland before heading to Newfoundland in November 1981. Newfoundland is a historically poor province, so people were eager for work, especially since the fishing industry was starting to dry up at that time, with bans on types of fish that could be harvested from the ocean. And before this rig came, the young people were unable to find work, so they would go to Alberta to work on the rigs. So, oil in Newfoundland. Why not? So when oil was discovered off the coast of Newfoundland in 1979, the government swore they wouldn't be slaves to the boom-bust cycle of oil, which as an Albertan, I know way too much about. Don't even get me started. It's infuriating. The Ocean Ranger was owned and operated by New Orleans-based Ocean Drilling and Exploration Company, and the people running the rig were pretty open about their disdain for Newfoundlanders. But they needed a job, so they would put up with the bad treatment. And they didn't just treat them bad, it wasn't safe on the rig. Like, rig work's dangerous, but there are things you can do to lessen the danger. Being on a rig out in the middle of the ocean, you need to have lifeboats. They didn't have enough lifeboats, and they didn't have training on how to use the lifeboats, because the rig was considered indestructible, because these people learned nothing from the unsinkable ship, the Titanic, that hit an iceberg and sank. And a lot of people got on-the-job training, which meant they weren't getting a whole lot of training, because they would just be thrown into the job. All right, learn. So it was dangerous. February 15th, 1982, during a terrible storm, the rig collapsed. For most of the 14th, 100 kilometer an hour, which is like 60 miles an hour winds, and 20 to 30 meter high, which is like, I didn't write down the calculation, so it's like almost 90-foot high waves were battering the rig. And this, according to CBC archives, the storm is classified as Sea State 8, which means waves averaging 15 meters, which is about 45 feet high, with 70 knot winds. Meteorologists call it a 10 to 12 year storm. A storm that severe happens approximately every 10 to 12 years. The waves were described as high and short, meaning they were tall with a short distance between them. This sort of wave has very steep slopes and often breaks, slapping anything in its path with a massive wall of water. That's, again, from the CBC archives. So a little after 7 p.m. on the 14th, nearby rig Sedco 706 overheard a radio transmission from the Ocean Ranger describing a broken porthole window, water coming in, and they were discussing how best to repair it. Then around 9 p.m., Sedco overheard radio transmissions saying the ballast control valves were opening and closing on their own. These valves controlled the rig's position in the sea, so they would let more or less water in, and it would make them move up and down based on how deep they wanted to be. This rig could operate, I believe it was up to 100 meters below the surface of the water. It was a partially submersible rig. So because of the storm, that had been damaged and they were going up and down on the water. And then at 11:30 p.m., the Ocean Ranger radioed a weather report to shore, but did not indicate any problems. So they figured, all right, they're fine. They're weathering the storm. But at 1 a.m. on now the 15th, the senior manager contacted shore to report that the rig was listing, which means it's tipping. And at 1:10 a.m., they sent out mayday calls. The final radio message was at 1:30 a.m., stating the crew were heading to lifeboats. The nearby ships attempted to rescue people from the lifeboats, but due to a combination of the storm and poorly maintained equipment, they were unable to successfully rescue anyone. Ocean Ranger sank at 2:45 a.m. on February 15th, 1982. All 84 people aboard died, 56 of whom were from Newfoundland. Only 22 bodies were ever recovered. These people that died are considered martyrs, that they sacrificed their lives for Newfoundland's economic future rather than being victims of corporate greed and lack of government oversight. There were no Canadian regulations for offshore work. So that's a problem. But there's a memorial held for them every year. There's a big monument to them in Newfoundland. And this is considered the worst at-sea Canadian disaster since World War II. Oil is in the blood of a lot of Canadians. Sean Cadigan, professor of history at Memorial University, said, "Oil has always been seen as the economic salvation of the province," meaning Newfoundland. And according to former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, it was the economic salvation for the entire country. Total of 114 people have died doing offshore oil work from off the shore of Newfoundland. And when people ask the Newfoundland government about their one-trick pony economy of all oil or nothing, this is a finite resource. What are we going to do if it runs out? The government replied that by the time it runs out, they'll have made enough money to invest in renewable energy, and that would create jobs for the future. But then there was a huge crash in oil prices in 2014, and the Alberta economy is kind of screwed right now too. Newfoundland economy is still struggling, and the provincial government itself of Newfoundland is at risk of bankruptcy. So, yeah, oil. Can't live with it, can't live without it. If you'd like to learn more about the Ocean Ranger disaster, there is a book, The Ocean Ranger, Remaking the Promise of Oil by Susan Dodd, D-O-D-D. Her brother Jim died on the Ocean Ranger. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, make sure you hit the thumbs up and the subscribe button. Comment down below if there's any other historical events or true crime stuff you would like me to cover, and have a great day. Bye.